On the night of March 17, 1883, in a smoke-filled saloon in Deadwood, South Dakota, 3 men sat down at a poker table to decide who would hang for a murder none of them committed. Not with cards, not with guns at dawn. With a single revolver, 1 bullet, and a game that would become known as the Devil's Roulette. By morning, 1 man was dead, another had lost his mind, and the third, Ezra 6 Chambers Holloway, had cemented his reputation as the most terrifying outlaw in the territories. This is the story of the Death Card Gang, the only outlaws in history who settled every dispute with a spin of the cylinder and a pull of the trigger. What follows is the most insane tale of chance, death, and madness the Wild West ever witnessed. Look at that photograph. 3 men sitting at a table, revolvers drawn, cards scattered, whiskey glasses half empty. But your eyes go to him first, don't they? The man on the left, leaning back like he doesn't have a care in the world. That revolver held casual as a handshake. That's Ezra Holloway, and those cold eyes have watched the light go out of 17 men's faces, all of them by their own hand. Born Ezra James Holloway in 1857 in St. Louis, Missouri, he was the son of a professional gambler and a French Quarter prostitute. His father taught him cards before he could write his name. His mother taught him to read people before they even opened their mouths. By 18, he'd killed his first man, a cattle baron who'd accused him of cheating at cards. The baron demanded a duel at dawn, but Ezra proposed something different. He pulled out his Colt .45, removed 5 bullets, spun the cylinder, put the gun to his own head, and pulled the trigger. Click. Empty chamber. Then he slid the gun across the table to the cattle baron and said, "Your turn." The baron, face white as chalk, refused, called Ezra insane, walked away humiliated in front of 50 witnesses. Word spread fast. There was a young gambler who'd bet his own life on the turn of a cylinder, and he had nerves of solid ice. They started calling him 6 Chambers Holloway, and the legend was born. The 2 men sitting with Ezra in that photograph were his only equals in the game of Russian roulette, a game that didn't even have a name yet when they started playing it. To Ezra's right, in the center, sits Malcolm "Lucky" Reeves, a former Union cavalry officer who'd survived Antietam, Gettysburg, and Sherman's March without a scratch. He'd been in 3 train wrecks and never broken a bone. By the time he met Ezra in 1879, Malcolm genuinely believed death couldn't touch him. The death card was his way of proving it. On the far right sits the youngest and craziest of the 3, a man known only as Idaho Jack Sterling. He was a ranch hand turned outlaw after he accidentally killed his boss's son in a shooting accident. The guilt drove him half mad, and he became obsessed with the idea of fate and chance. He played the game like it was confession and execution combined. Together, these 3 formed the Death Card Gang, and they had one rule that set them apart from every other outlaw gang in the West. They never settled disputes with violence. Every disagreement, every split of loot, every question of leadership, all of it was decided by the death card. 1 bullet, 1 spin, and fate would decide. It was the most insane governing system any criminal enterprise had ever operated under, and somehow it worked. The game was simple, but the psychological torture was profound. 1 revolver, usually Ezra's nickel-plated Colt .45. 1 bullet loaded into one of the 6 chambers. Spin the cylinder. Each player puts the gun to their own head and pulls the trigger in turn. Last man alive wins the dispute, but there were variations. The quick draw death card. 2 players, 1 bullet, 1 spin. Both go once. If both survive, the dispute is dropped. Used for minor disputes. The 5-chamber death. 5 bullets loaded, 1 empty chamber, used only for unforgivable offenses. Essentially, execution with a 1 in 6 chance of divine intervention. The Russian standoff. 3 or more players, 1 bullet, 1 spin. Each goes in turn until someone dies or everyone survives 1 round. Used for major decisions like splitting large hauls. The mercy round. If someone claimed innocence, they'd go first with 3 pulls of the trigger. If they survived all 3, they were declared innocent by fate itself. The psychological torture of waiting your turn, hearing the cylinder spin, watching another man put the gun to his head, hearing the click of an empty chamber or the bang of the fatal shot. It broke men faster than any torture device ever invented. Word of the death card gang spread through the territories like wildfire. Other outlaw gangs thought they were insane, which they were, but they were also the most disciplined gang anyone had ever seen. There were no internal fights, no backstabbing, no power struggles. Disputes were settled immediately and final, and Ezra 6 Chambers Holloway never lost. Between 1879 and 1883, Ezra played the death card 17 times in recorded instances. 17 men sat across from him, put that revolver to their head, and pulled the trigger. 17 men died. Ezra walked away every single time without a scratch. The odds of that were astronomical. People started whispering that he'd made a deal with the devil, that he'd sold his soul for immunity from the death card. The truth was far more terrifying. Ezra Holloway had ice water in his veins and an understanding of probability that most people in the 1880s couldn't comprehend. He knew how to read men, knew when they were nervous, knew which ones would flinch at the crucial moment, and he never, ever showed fear. Fear was what killed men in the death card. The pounding heart, the shaking hands, the moment of hesitation, that's when you made mistakes. Ezra never feared, Ezra never hesitated, and Ezra never lost. But the night of March 17th, 1883, in that Deadwood saloon, that was different. A U.S. Marshal named Hank Garrison had been murdered in his bed, shot twice in the back. 3 men were suspects: Ezra Holloway, Malcolm Reeves, and Idaho Jack Sterling, the death card gang, all of whom had been in town that night. The problem, none of them had actually killed the marshal. The real killer was a corrupt sheriff from the next county over who'd murdered Garrison before he could testify about payoff schemes. But the sheriff needed scapegoats, and 3 known outlaws were perfect candidates. The sheriff gave them a choice. One of them confesses and hangs, or all 3 hang together in the morning. So the death card gang did what they always did. They let fate decide. They sat down at that poker table, and for the first time in their partnership, they played the death card not against an enemy, but against each other. 3 men, 1 bullet, 1 spin. The survivor would confess to the murder they didn't commit and hang. The dead would be buried quietly. At least 2 of them would avoid the noose. It was insane. It was inevitable. It was the only solution their twisted code of honor would allow. Look at that photograph again. That was taken hours before they played. You can see it in their faces. They knew what was coming. The whiskey wasn't for celebration. It was for courage. Idaho Jack drew the 3 of spades. He'd go first. Malcolm Lucky Reeves drew the Jack of Hearts, second. Ezra 6 Chambers Holloway drew the Ace of Clubs, last. Ezra loaded 1 bullet into his Colt 45, the same gun that had decided the fate of 17 men before this night. He spun the cylinder, a long, loud spin that echoed in the silent saloon. Every patron had cleared out except for 3 witnesses: a bartender, a prostitute named Mary, and an old prospector. The cylinder stopped spinning. Idaho Jack took the gun. His hands were shaking. For the first time since any of them had known him, Idaho showed fear. He put the revolver to his temple, closed his eyes, and said a prayer. Bang! Idaho Jack Sterling died instantly, slumping forward onto the table. Mary screamed. Blood pooled on the wood. The first chamber hadn't been empty. Malcolm Reeves sat frozen, staring at his dead friend. All his luck, all his years of survival, and now it came down to this: 5 chambers left, 1 with a bullet. Ezra calmly removed the gun from Idaho's dead hand, spun the cylinder again, that was the rule, and handed it to Malcolm. Malcolm took the gun. He looked at Ezra and said, "If I make it and you don't, I want you to know, you were the best friend I ever had." Ezra nodded. No words necessary. Malcolm put the gun to his head and pulled the trigger. Click. Empty chamber. Malcolm was still alive. The odds were now 50-50. Malcolm handed the gun back to Ezra. According to the rules, Ezra should spin again, but Ezra 6 chambers Holloway looked at the revolver in his hand, looked at his dead friend Idaho Jack, looked at Malcolm Reeves and made a decision that would define his legend forever. He didn't spin the cylinder. "What are you doing?" Malcolm asked, voice cracking. "I'm playing the game," Ezra said calmly. 1 bullet, 6 chambers, 3 players. Idaho used 2 chambers. You used 1. That leaves 3 chambers in the rotation. One of them has the bullet. "Ezra, spin the gun. That's the rule." "The rule," Ezra said, placing the gun to his own temple, "is that fate decides. If that bullet is meant for me, it'll find me whether I spin or not." And before Malcolm could say another word, Ezra pulled the trigger. Click. Empty chamber. The mathematical impossibility of Ezra's survival became legend in that moment. He'd played Russian roulette 18 times. He'd never lost. He'd just survived the death card game against his own friends, and one of them was dead. Malcolm Reeves started laughing, a terrible, broken sound. "You magnificent bastard, you survived again!" But Ezra wasn't celebrating. He looked at Idaho Jack's body and said quietly, "We need a new plan." What happened next became the most talked about moment in Deadwood history. Ezra and Malcolm didn't confess. They didn't wait for the hanging. Instead, they walked into the sheriff's office with Idaho Jack's body, told the corrupt sheriff exactly who'd really killed Marshall Garrison, and challenged him to a death card game to prove their innocence. The sheriff, trapped by his own corruption and surrounded by witnesses, was forced to either accept the challenge or admit he'd framed them. He accepted. The game was simple. The sheriff would go first. If he survived, Ezra and Malcolm would hang. If he died, the real investigation would proceed and they'd be cleared. The sheriff, sweating bullets, took the gun. 1 bullet, 6 chambers, 1 spin. He put the gun to his head, and Ezra said, "Wait, that's not my gun. Use yours." The sheriff's face went white. Using his own gun meant he couldn't know if Ezra had somehow rigged the weapon. Every fear, every paranoia, every bit of guilt came flooding through him. He confessed right there, admitted to killing Marshall Garrison, admitted to the frame-up, admitted everything. Ezra and Malcolm walked out free men. Legally speaking, anyway, they were still wanted for 24 other crimes. Malcolm "Lucky" Reeves disappeared after Deadwood. Some say his luck finally ran out in a cholera epidemic in 1885. Others claim he made it to San Francisco and died of old age. But those who knew him said he was never the same after Idaho Jack died. Ezra 6 Chambers Holloway became a legend. Stories about him spread across the West, always exaggerated, but the core remained. Here was a man who'd played Russian roulette 19 times and never lost. The death card gang dissolved after Deadwood, but the game they popularized spread like wildfire. The Russian roulette craze of the 1880s and 1890s killed hundreds of men before authorities finally banned it in most territories. Ezra himself was reportedly spotted in Tombstone in 1887, in Denver in 1889, and in Alaska during the gold rush of 1897. The last confirmed report came in 1902 when an old man matching Ezra's description was seen in a San Francisco gambling hall. When someone asked if he was the famous Six Chambers Holloway, he supposedly smiled and said, "I never played a game I couldn't win." He walked out that night and was never seen again. Look at that photograph one final time. 3 men about to decide life and death with a bullet and a prayer. Idaho Jack, who died believing fate had judged him guilty. Malcolm Lucky Reeves, who learned that luck runs out for everyone eventually. And Ezra Six Chambers Holloway, who proved that sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't the gun. It's the man who has absolutely nothing to fear from it. The Death Card Gang only operated for 4 years, but they changed outlaw culture forever. They proved you didn't need to be the fastest draw or the best shot. You just needed to be willing to bet everything on a single pull of a trigger. Ezra Six Chambers Holloway played Russian roulette 19 times in recorded history and walked away every single time. The mathematical probability of that is so astronomical that people still debate whether he was lucky, divinely protected, or something else entirely. But those who sat across from him, who watched those cold eyes never blink as he put that gun to his head and pulled the trigger, they knew the truth. Ezra Holloway wasn't lucky. He was simply a man who understood that in a world of chance and chaos, the only way to control your fate was to embrace the possibility of death so completely that it lost all power over you. The death card claimed 17 men who challenged Ezra, 1 friend who died in his place, and countless others who played the game across the West. But it never claimed Ezra Six Chambers Holloway. Some say that's luck. Others say it's a deal with the devil. But maybe it was simply the will of a man who looked death in the eye 19 times and never blinked first. Ezra Six Chambers Holloway and the Death Card Gang turned the Wild West's most dangerous game into a code of honor and left behind a legend written in empty chambers and dead men's eyes.